Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending where you are on the planet. Welcome, 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 welcome. I am so excited about today's workshop. I've been doing this work for over 30 years, and just recently I stumbled upon a new stream of research, I don't know what else to call it, that is just so eye-opening. It's refreshing, it's exciting, and I am just so jazzed to be here. So welcome everyone. I can see people are joining. We have people from all over the world, every continent but Antarctica. So please say hello. Let us know your name. I guess YouTube, not YouTube, but the Zoom will tell you there, but where you're from, and share with us what has been the best part of your 2022 so far. Got folks from San Diego. Good morning, Jennifer. San Jose, Louisville. Hello, Riverside. California is represented. North Carolina, New Hampshire, New York, Dallas. Wow, now it's going to aloha. I saw from Hawaii. And I'm so sorry I got the Hawaiian times. I forgot you in Arizona. Don't do standard time. Austin, Montana. Wow. Canada, Texas, Malta. Love it. Indiana. India. Awesome. Tennessee, Massachusetts. Welcome, everyone. Turkey. Oh, London, UK. Love it. Love it. Welcome. Folks from all over. Barbados. I love this. It's kind of like getting a tour of the world. Love it. Virgin Islands, got to go there one day. New Mexico. Awesome. So we're going to go ahead. I know lots of folks are joining. I just want to begin to make sure everyone knows how to get their free CE certificate. So you all hopefully got an email that had a password and told you to link into therapythatworksinstitute.com. And there is a type of online course there. The video and handouts from today are going to be posted there along with all the references. You're going to take a short kind of CE quiz. Promise you it is, did you listen to the video is the point of the quiz. And you take an evaluation, and then your CE will be sent to you via email as soon as you've completed all of that. So, and I have to limit it until February 8th. As a professional speaker, when I sign contracts, there's these clauses, you won't have any competing events. So I have to limit the time when I do each of my speaking events, believe it or not. So this will be free through February 8th. So I don't violate any of my other contracts. Very cool. And I just want to talk a little bit about why I'm doing this. I think for all of us on the planet, but especially those of us in health and mental health, the last 2 years have obviously been just beyond, I don't even know words I don't even know the adjectives to describe the last 2 years. But many of us have worked just tireless long hours. And we're helping pick up, humanity from just the tremendous trauma, loss, and grief of the fallout of the last couple of years. And one of the folks who wrote into me when I said, what are some of your biggest struggles? One of the folks wrote into me about just like, we don't celebrate ourselves enough in the heroic work we're doing. Just so you know, we have over 2,000 people from around the world kind of registered for this webinar, which is really amazing. And I thought about that and I did the math, and altogether as a group, we have helped at least 1 million people in the last year. And I know some of you are just brand new students. Maybe you're like, I didn't see that many people. But I know I got one email. I think I got an email from someone in Turkey. I believe it was Turkey. Forgive me if I got it wrong. Who is her question? Her top struggle is, I'm seeing over 30 people a day, and we are working hard. And so, this workshop, I hope, is going to help revive your spirits, lift you up, give you hope, give you new ideas of how to keep doing this work well. So, and then it just so happens one of the silver linings of the pandemic is we've all gotten really good at Zoom and learned how to do this. So this is my way of giving back to the community. I think all of us as professionals, we have an obligation to do work that is free, that supports, that builds up our communities. And this is just one of the ways I'm able to do so. So yeah, and so hopefully, through this workshop, you are going to get a vision, I think, for our profession, and just in terms of what the research is showing us, the most effective ways to be helping our clients. And I really think there is a new direction that is kind of unfolding, and it is really exciting to me. For those of you who don't know me, I guess I should introduce myself. My name is Diane Gayhart. I have been doing this work for 30 years. I've been a professor and an author, largely in the area of theories for 25 years. And so, and I write a lot of textbooks, which really forces you to keep up with theory and research and all that good stuff. And so this is just an extension of that journey for me. But I think the one thing that I've really become passionate about in the last few years is how do we do this work, more efficiently? Obviously, we've got more people to help than there are enough of us to go around to do that work. And how do we make doing this work easier? And that's been, if you've been following me at all in the last few years, I think we've really made this work so much harder to do. And that is my passion right now. And the focus of my energies as an academic and an author is really how do we do this work better and more efficiently and make it easier? Because we've just, I think, become too fragmented. I'm going to stop talking there because then I'm going to branch out into another workshop. So let's try to stay focused on this one. So today, in the next hour, I am going to give you a real update on what the research says about what highly effective clinicians are doing differently. I do a lot of researching. I do a lot of writing. I read a lot in the field and theory and research. And I'm telling you, this was jaw-dropping research to me. I was like, oh my God, I've suspected some of this anecdotally, and it was really shocking. Some of it I didn't realize. So I think you're going to really enjoy today's workshop. And at the end, we'll have some time if you wanted to chat. I'm going to share some of my ideas about what I am doing and trying in terms of the direction I see where this field needs to go in terms of how we approach our work, think about our work, train, because I think there are just much easier ways to do this work, much easier ways to train. And as a professor for 25 years, the training piece is interesting, but I think we have just made this work so much harder than it needs to be. And hopefully today you're going to be inspired. Okay. So we're going to start by just talking in general, broad sweeping terms about what the research found. Are we headed in the right direction is the question we're going to start off with. And then I'm going to go through some of the more recent research on why some clinicians are better than average clinicians. What are they doing differently? And what is it that really makes an expert? And then I'm going to try to boil all of this down to 3 core competencies that really characterize these better than average, extraordinary clinicians. And then finally, I'm going to wrap up by talking about how you can start do-it-yourself kind of approach to developing some of these skills, as well as looking at this framework that I am developing called the Therapy That Works. And I'm going to outline that for you so you have a sense of what that is and how it fits in to how to hopefully make this work easier for you to do. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so I'm not going to sugarcoat things. People who know me know I don't sugarcoat a lot, but we don't seem to be entirely on the right course as a profession. And I think what's happened is we've lost some of our balance in terms of theory. I mean, if you know me and you know my work, I'm a theoretician. I think that's often how I've described what I do. And we need theory. I'm not going to say that we don't need theory, but my working hypothesis right now is we have a bit too much of it, and that has really become almost a burden, and we need to find ways to streamline it. Obviously, we need research. And research, I mean, I entered the field 30 years ago. And when I entered the field, there wasn't research that could really help us be more effective in very specific ways. We have that research now. It's totally exciting and amazing, and I love it. I think it makes us more effective being able to use that, but it is not the be all end all. And then there's the part about the human connection, the humanitarian part of our work. And that's the piece I think that we've gotten a little bit lost and we need to rekindle, because we've become very theory focused, research focused, evidence-based treatment focused, which is all good stuff. I am not saying we don't need it, but I'm saying it is unbalanced right now in terms of how we are approaching this work. And I think we are seeing it just in how we're burning ourselves out. And all of this talk about imposter syndrome, you know, when folks wrote back to me, what's your number one struggle? So many people described various phases of burnout, being overwhelmed, and feeling like an imposter, not knowing if I'm actually helping my clients. And all of that comes from, I think, losing a sense of balance in all of the resources that we have and making this work overly cumbersome for those of us who see 30 clients a week, and for God bless the people who are seeing 30 clients a day. But that type of workload that so many of us carry is not sustainable the way how complex we've made the work. And I think one of the real exciting things about this new stream of research is that the therapist effects, like who you are as a human and what you bring to the process. It used to be something they tried to rule out when they're trying to figure out which model was better than the other model, you know, and they were always trying to factor that out and factor out the therapist. What they realized it's not just a nuisance and a problem and trying to figure out which theory works, but it is who we are and what we bring to this process is what most of the research is pointing to is the most effective piece, the most important piece to what's going on in that room. And we've become overly obsessed with our models and our treatment interventions and not spending enough time on who we are and how we affect, as humans, how we affect the process. So, and so just, you know, the therapist effects really are more important than the models, what everything's shaking out and pointing in that direction. And if you're not familiar with how EBTs can become EBTs, evidence-based treatments, you know, an evidence-based treatment just means it is equal to, I mean, the entry-level requirement is that you are equal to treatment as usual. You're as good as for a specific condition. And there are very few, and it takes many, many years to get to you are better than treatment is average. And we all seem to treat any EBT as better than average, but that's not actually what that designation means when you look into it. And so there's this long process to really for a treatment to become better than average. And I think some of that gets lost in the translation of our work. And so in terms of clinician effects, I think the first place most of us got introduced to this is what I'm going to call now the traditional common factors research, because there's more. And I have not seen it labeled as such in the research literature itself. But if you look at who the authors are, and you look at what the current research I'm going to talk about today, I would see it as an evolution of coming out of this common factors research. So I think it's important that we talk about it. And if you're familiar with the common factors, there are a couple different strands of common factors, but this is looking at what is similar across theories that accounts for change is actually more important in terms of the analysis from this strand of research or stream of research than the model itself. And so when you look at client outcomes, if you roughly attribute an overview, an educated, I guess, analysis of the research is about 30% of outcomes, roughly speaking, is attributed to the quality of the therapeutic relationship. And that is the one variable we have the most effect on. 15% of client outcome is attributed to hope, or what they call the placebo effect. And I think the placebo is one of the most understudied, amazing psychological abilities we have, which is where hope is so powerful that every medication on earth, the clinical trial is all about If a person doesn't believe this is going to help them, does the medication still help? Or if they do they have to rule that out, because hope is so powerful. I do not know why we have not mined this incredible ability of hope, of placebo, and tried to understand why is hope so powerful. But when you think about it, and again, this is my interpretation. I've not found this in the literature. It's in my, is that placebo comes down to who we are as humans, and can we inspire hope? Do our clients believe that we are the right person with the right approach to help them with their unique problem? That's what hope is. And that really comes down to what we're going to be talking about with clinician effects, because one of the most important clinician effects we have is to inspire hope in our clients. Okay, when you do the math there, that's 45% right there. 40% of client factors are attributed to, client outcome is attributed to client factors, which is the severity of the problem, the social, emotional, financial resources they have, how motivated they are to change, that sort of thing. And if you think about it, great clinicians know how to harness those and build upon those client factors in their work. And then 15% is therapeutic models. So our theories really do make a difference. They are in the top 4, category here. But I think the problem is that we put, all of our focus, or the vast majority of our focus, in our clinical training, in our continuing education training, in our license exam preparation, is so theory focused. It gives the illusion that this is the most important thing, but that is not what the research says. And I'm going to say that over and over today, and I hope it sinks into your mind and your soul and your consciousness, that who you are as a human is really the most important thing to cultivate in doing this work effectively. So what's, I think, was some of the jaw-dropping, eye-popping research that I was reading that really was totally different than anything I felt like I had ever read in my career, was that researchers are finding that 15 to 20% of clinicians are better than the rest. And that they found that these clinicians, no matter which theoretical model, they give them manualized treatments, no matter what model they're using, they get better outcomes. And that they were finding that these better than average clinicians tend to start better and stay better over the entirety of their career. That's pretty stunning. And as someone who has been training therapists full-time for the last 25 years, this makes a lot of sense to me because I've seen it. And so what's so exciting to me is that this new research is helping us quantify, identify, put our finger on what's going on here, so that we can all be part of this better than average set, which of course, hey, if highly effective is average, that is good for the planet. And I want to get us all there. That is the goal of today. And so that and then in general, these clinician effects are just the most important factor in all forms across all different forms of research and studies. So the concern I have as someone who writes theory textbooks and trains people, to pass licensing exams, et cetera, is that like 90% or more of our, postgraduate training, during our graduate school training, licensing, we are very theory focused. We've become very evidence-based treatment focused, which is, it's all good. I love theory. If anyone on this planet loves theory, it is me. It's good, it's helpful, it's useful. It does help develop us as humans, but we don't want to mistake what's actually causing the change here. And that is us and our humanity as clinicians when we show up for our clients. And that there really has been very little focus on developing the self of the clinician and the factors that are correlated with being highly effective. And, in terms of the therapeutic relationship, the counseling relationship, most of us think of that as we equate it with just being empathy and, learning empathy, and that's what the relationship is. And it is a very underdeveloped understanding of what is actually causing change. And I think it's funny, we're very highly developed in this theoretical and research part of our knowledge base as professions, but we are very underdeveloped in how to develop a human being to be highly effective at this work, and to really understanding what is happening between the clinician and the client when this work is effective. And so that is what we're going to be talking about today in some detail, because I think it's just so important. And, you know, self-care is one of the big buzzwords of today, at least here in the United States. We love to talk about it a lot, but it is this amorphous, like no one's really defined it all that well, or what the work to do that is. Oftentimes it's referred to as, you know, go get your own psychotherapy or counseling to work on yourself, or do some meditation. And developing the self of someone who does this work well involves a lot more than just go get your own therapy and do a little meditation. Okay, so let's dig in. Why are some clinicians better than others? Let's talk about it. So we're going to start by talking about 4 factors that have been identified: the therapeutic presence and alliance, which they are distinguishing from interpersonal skills. So that's the stuff that you're, more saying, and the skills of doing it. There is the presence, the being who you are and your presence in the room, as well as the interpersonal skills you have in communicating. And this one, I know many of you are going to love this part. This might be your favorite part of the whole day, is a third factor, and again, it is stunning that this came to the top of the list, was what they call professional self-doubt, which is doubting yourself a little bit. So we'll get to that. I don't think, so a little imposter syndrome is probably doing you good and is a sign of a highly efficient clinician. Woohoo! I know there's some people really excited as we will go in depth to that. And then this 4th concept of deliberate practice, and I will define that and we will go into that. So let's jump in here and talk about alliance. So when they're talking about therapeutic alliance or presence, this is so much more than having empathy for somebody. And they kind of broke it down to 3 basic parts. And the first is the bond between the client and the clinician. And that bond we're talking about here is really in a human-to-human kind of connecting way, as well as agreement on the goals of treatment and how we're going to go about reaching those goals, the tasks of therapy. So let's go in. So this was really an interesting finding, I think, that some clinicians are hands down better at forming relationships with all of their clients, regardless of what model they're using. I really want you to think about that your ability to connect with your client at a human level is probably the most important skill you can have, or ability. But it's a difficult one to train as a trainer of clinicians. And it really is cultivated at a very personal level as who you are as a human being. What was also very finding, they did a lot of research. Well, maybe it's the client and maybe they're resistant, or maybe they're difficult, or maybe they have a personality disorder, or you name it, right? Or they're mandated. What they found is that highly effective clinicians, that it does not matter the client characteristics, those better than average top 15%, they connect consistently across all clients, regardless of your client's presenting problem or personality characteristics. How's that for stunning and humbling? And that there was really this uniformity about clinician effects. And so the question comes up about, race, ethnicity, gender. What they did find is that highly effective clinicians are more effective across all demographics and problems. Now, there were some moderate differences in terms of, we're going to get to kind of, I think the term they actually use in this research is cultural competence. I know not everyone likes that term, but I think that's what the researchers said there. But in general, what they did find, even across race, gender, ethnicity, the clinician effects were more important than those diversity variables. The diversity variables were one of the few things that were measurable. But again, what was more important was the base level of that clinician as a human being to connect with another clinician, that there is some skill there that allows you to transcend many diversity variables, better than just being focused on cultural competence. And that's actually what the research found, or just matching up people on gender, race, ethnicity, social economic class, those sorts of things. So overall, effective clinicians are better with diverse clients, regardless of their own diversity or the client's diversity. Again, a really eye-opening finding. Another really interesting finding is that your adherence to your model is irrelevant if your therapeutic alliance is high. And I know those of you who are in graduate programs listening to this might don't go running away with this. You still need to learn your models and theories. And those of you studying for licensing exams, do not be disheartened. They're still important. But when the therapeutic alliance is low, your ability to follow a model is more important. So that really kind of reframes, I think, a little bit of what we're doing with evidence-based treatments. Now, all that said, I know brilliant, when you're doing research on an evidence-based treatment, you have to have, the clinicians in the study have to have high model adherence. You actually have to measure all of that. So if you're a researcher, you still have to measure all of this. But for those of us who are like day-to-day in the field, if you get better at that, I guess maybe another way to look at this is if you can develop this high quality alliance, that you have a lot more flexibility in terms of how you use your model. I know, is this good stuff? Okay, we're gonna talk a little bit here just about your personal attachment style and how that affects the alliance, because of course there was research done on this too. I'm telling you, there's a ton of research on this. So clinicians, like the general population, we average about 60% of us have secure attachment, which is interesting, they said, actually. It's kind of surprising it's that high because we tend to have more adverse childhood experiences, more, higher levels of psychopathology. If you didn't know that, that is true about mental health professionals, if you're wondering. So what's interesting, though, is that even though we have more stressors, we're like the rest of the population, 60% are securely attached. However, that does mean that about 40% of clinicians tend to have more insecure attachment. And so looking at what the researchers found with that, those who have more secure attachment, clinicians with secure, I think it's more of a spectrum, more secure attachment, they are more trusting and they're more comfortable with closeness with their clients. And that the more distressed a client is, the more important it is that the clinician has developed and that you can learn to become securely attached if you didn't necessarily come with that from your upbringing. It's more important that we have that secure attachment because we can self-regulate when our clients get distressed. And if you have a less secure attachment style, it's going to be harder for you to regulate when your clients get distressed, and that's going to negatively impact, obviously, the relationship. Those who have insecure attachment actually tend to be less empathetic, and they have a harder time accurately identifying what the client needs, which I thought was interesting. It's because their filters, it's kind of like your filter's kind of foggy and you're not actually able to accurately identify what the client needs from you or what they need in general. And then what was also really fascinating is anxiously attached clinicians. That tends to be a very positive, their therapeutic alliance starts off really strong because you're eager to please. So they're positive benefits. If you're anxiously attached in the beginning, you're like gangbusters building a great relationship. But over time, as all relationships have up, downs, and bumps, you tend to, anxiously attached clinicians tend to get more reactive and defensive. And so that over time, that the quality of the alliance goes down. And so it really comes back to developing more of our self-regulation and an accurate perception of the problem, in terms of looking at our own attachment patterns and how they're affecting the clinical relationship. So looking at diversity, knowledge, and sensitivity, there were definitely some findings around this, and there were the three positive correlates that they found. One is, and this is no surprise to anyone I think who works in this area, is having clinicians who are highly effective have cultivated a sincere cultural humility in terms of how they approach diversity in their work. And, this is true when you're working with someone who looks very different from you, as well as, and I almost think more important, when you're working with someone who looks very similar to you, because that's when we want to project all of our values, because you should have the same, we're alike. You should think like I do. We should have the same values. So whether the person actually is diverse from you or very similar to you, having this cultural humility is very important to understand how your client is experiencing their social location, their gender, ethnicity, race, economic class, education level, ability levels, all of that. Even if they're very similar to you, you've got to even be more on alert to not project onto them. The second thing that highly effective clinicians did around diversity that was different than others or less effective clinicians is that when the moment comes to address a diversity issue, they are not afraid to go there. Sometimes, it's as simple as your client is describing a very difficult scenario, let's say at work or at school, and you say, and you're the one who asked the question, do you think, the way you look or your skin color or your gender had something to do with how this played out? And that can be one of the most liberating, validating questions you can ask as a clinician. And the third one is just cultural comfort, getting comfortable with discussing issues of gender, race, diversity, those sorts of things, to be able to discuss those in open, liberating, freeing ways where people don't feel like they're on eggshells for not using the right term that might offend you. And, oh my goodness, yeah, and how do I say this without sounding, racist, sexist, whatever, heterosexist, you name it. So having comfort and being able to talk about these very difficult situations and being able to make it comfortable for the client to speak freely and not be on eggshells. So those are some of the, those are the three main things that came out of looking at how highly effective clinicians are handling issues around diversity. And so kind of talking about this whole concept, it really reminded me of actually some of the stuff that I read at the very beginning of my career. And in doing this work and in training people to do this work, I think what they're talking about with these highly effective clinicians is that there is this ability, and I don't know what else to call it, and we're going to go through what some other people have called it, but I call it calling forth the humanity of the other. There is this moment when you're working with someone where both you and the client feel just touched in a very deep level, and kind of rekindling that sense of connection. And it happens through relationship. And that's why these relationships we have with our clients are just so powerful. And at this time in history, I don't think these are the relationships that will help us heal through all of the different struggles we have been going through around the globe. And if you look at some of the research, I, like so many people I'm sure on this call, I started reading on, my professional career reading On Becoming a Person by Carl Rogers. And his writing is really profound, and he really touches on this, touching the humanity of the other. And I think the core conditions are great. It kind of, simplifies, and that was his research hypothesis. That's what Rogers, that was his research hypothesis, those core conditions, if you don't remember. But we have become fixated on empathy. And I even remember when I was in my first semester of training to be a clinician years ago, I got my hand on Karkoff's, chart of 5 different levels of empathy. And I wanted a top level 5, every single reflection I had, and that is just such the wrong way to go about this work. But, but so much of the work has been overly focused on empathy, and that's absolutely a prerequisite. You got to have it. Even the research is very, clear. The core conditions are essential. They are not totally sufficient. And so I invite you, if you ever read On Becoming a Person, it's great to go back and reread it as a practicing clinician and to connect with that. You also see this, I think, very clearly in the collaborative therapy, postmodern practices. And I think there it gets lost because the language is so philosophical, at least a lot of Americans get overwhelmed and lost in the vocabulary of deconstruction, and it doesn't sound very, connecting with one's humanity. But if you watch some of these leaders like Harlene Anderson and especially Tom Anderson, because Tom Anderson, if you ever got to see him, he's the one who developed reflecting teams. He hardly used words. and his presence, I mean, Tom Anderson was like being in the presence of an angel. But his presence was so, it was awe-inspiring. It was beautiful. It was healing. It was the way he connected with the other person's humanity. So you definitely see it in that work. And it's in Martin Buber, who, if you may remember him, he's actually a Jewish philosopher connected with some of the founding works of existentialism and humanism. And also in Buddhist psychology, they talk a lot about this compassion. And a compassion that's really grounded in this like wisdom and compassion for the human condition. It's like, I see the suffering of the world they talk about. And to just bring it full circle, if you're familiar with any of the interpersonal neurobiology and attunement research, there's a neural resonance we get into when clients feel felt. This is the work of Dan Siegel, where clients feel felt. And where there is this attunement, and this is what the highly effective clinicians are doing. So you can come at it from a Buddhist perspective, a Jewish philosophical, postmodern deconstruction, Carl Rogers. There are many doors. Everyone's tried to describe this. And even, I love it now that the neurobiologists are in on it too. There's something going on when humans connect like this. And this is what transforms. This is what heals, if that word works for you. Transforms. This is where the effectiveness happens, if that's a better word for you. And, when I invited folks, and I've gone through many of the emails, I have not gotten through all of them. There are 2,000 folks who are participating in this week. I hope to get to them by the end of the week. But one of the top things that really came up was, how do you connect with people? Via telehealth, you don't have the nonverbals, they're not feeling connected. And so, yes, it's very different connecting with people online, but just remember, you're connecting with their sense of humanity. And so this ability to have that interpersonal attunement can happen online. And generally, if a client is able, if they're willing participants in it and they want to be there, and that does make it, I think, harder. That's the 5% that if they don't really want to connect, then it's really hard to make that happen in person or on Zoom. But if you can create that connection in person, you can connect it. You can do it online. And because it really comes down to that willingness to reach out, to know that other person as a human. And so, and I think what has happened is so much of our training is so focused on just empathy and maybe reading nonverbal cues. It's a very, and that we have not done enough in our profession to teach people how to use their humanity to connect with another human. And you can do that across screens. You can do that in the same room. And if you can make the other human across from you feel safe, even if they don't want to be there, you can find a way to connect. And so it's building that safety, being honest, being genuine, being a human. I will tell you, with my couple clients, because I do couples therapy now on telehealth. I never thought I would do telehealth before the pandemic, like most of us. And to just be open about it. So I tell, one of the things I've found doing couples therapy is that when you're in the room, you can like feel the tension rise. But on telehealth, you often can't. And sometimes they're not even both fully on the screen at once. So I've just told my couples, okay, so it's really hard. I can't read I can't read the tension in the room the same way. It's really delayed. And by the time your irritation with your partner is visible, I'm the last one to know. So just let me know. And so my clients have been great. They're like, yeah, I'm triggered. You may not, I'm just want to let you know so you don't miss it. I'm like, thank you. So it almost becomes a hilarious little moment there that they, over Zoom, they have to announce it. but boy, they're getting good skills in their own relationship, learning how to flag that. So there are ways to connect as a human across these screens. And when you have those challenges that come up, learning how to talk about that as another human, connecting with another human across those differences. I think the number one thing I heard from everyone, and probably no surprise, in one form or another, the biggest struggle folks who wrote into me said there was some form of being burdened and overwhelmed, some just generally, some very specific to the pandemic and the grief and the loss of the pandemic. Some it's specific to trauma. Some were just trying to remain fresh and, wanting some new ideas on how to do their work and stay fresh and engaged, and just even finding ways to engage their clients better. So, and the one thing I will say is that when you focus your work on connecting as a human with the other person on the end of that screen or across from you in the room, when you're able to connect to that sense of humanity that so many founders in our field and even the new neurobiologists are talking about, that is inherently energizing when you're able to make that connection. And to the point, in one of my classes, I do this, and we'll talk a little bit about the simulation training. I mean, it's a mixed reality simulation, virtual reality type of experience, and we can have these humanizing connections in virtual reality. You can have them on Zoom, you can have them in a room, and they are profound and they touch you as a human. And it reminds you why you're doing this work. And so the more you connect in this way, I promise you, the less burned out and alive this work is going to make you. I always say one of the best days of I work 2 afternoons a week seeing clients. Those are usually the 2 best afternoons of my week, just in terms of how it fuels me as a human to be able to touch another human's life. Okay, so that was the first therapeutic presence. Was the number one thing that distinguished those highly effective clinicians from others. The second one is these interpersonal facilitative skills. And look, we don't even, I doubt there's a textbook on the planet that distinguishes the first of these 4 factors of highly effective clinicians from the second one, which are the skills. Because this is what we get more of in graduate school. So, but I found this list very interesting and not all of these you will find in all your textbooks. So one is just being verbally fluent. They're good at talking clearly and communicating clearly. They're able to express their emotions appropriately. I actually believe, I know not everyone agrees with me, but there are moments where using humor is very therapeutic and healing, and there are funny moments, and you need to be able to sometimes laugh as a clinician, as well as be there in the grief and the pain and the sadness when it would be inappropriate to laugh. So being able to appropriately express the full range of human emotion is very important for us in our clinical work. This I found very fascinating. Because better clinicians are persuasive. And I really had to think about that a little bit. But when you don't want to be manipulative, obviously, in your persuasion, but you need to be persuasive that there is hope. And that goes back to the placebo. And that you sometimes need to be persuasive that these little steps are likely going to help you, that, hopefully you've identified them collaborative with your client, they're meaningful to your client. And there's a little bit of persuasion that many of us need in order to do the hard work that is often associated with change. They communicate hopefulness, which is, again, going to the placebo, right back to that, highly effective clinicians just naturally inspire hopefulness and motivate you to take those difficult steps towards change. Obviously, they're warm and empathetic. So that one, we do well in training that one in our field. We got this. And they're focused on their client concerns, and they really connect with their motivation. And what this means is maybe your theory is saying something, or your personal experience is saying something. And regardless of what all that says, or your evidence-based treatment manual is saying something, but you're tuned in to what the client is saying is their concern, and what they think needs to be, what they're willing to do, what they think needs to happen. That level of attunement is the leading edge, though, with those highly effective clinicians. Okay, and so along with this, in terms of a strong interpersonal skills, is this appropriate responsiveness. What does that mean? I know it's a little daunting, but it's doing the right thing at the right time in the right context. Actually, one of my mentors, Harlene Anderson, has said multiple times, there's not anything you cannot not say in therapy. And I think there might be a few exceptions we can argue. But her point is it though appropriately responsive? Are you you saying the right thing at the right time in the right context? Okay. So all these rules we have about what to say, what not to say, which we learn. And in the beginning, those are great training wheels. Okay. I understand. I've taught first year clinical skills courses. We do give these guidelines. But there's a certain point where, what do you need to say at the right time in the right place, in the right context, and good clinicians are able to attune into that. But it requires a lot of flexibility and awareness, even in terms of choosing our treatments and based on the client's needs. And if you become too driven by theory or your evidence-based treatment, you're not appropriately responsive to the client, and you're not going to be as effective, and one of the things, a very simple example is clinicians, we tend to like more emotionally based effective interventions more than cognitive ones in general, I would say, as a profession, perhaps. It doesn't really matter what your preference is, and you probably have one preference for one over the other. And we see all of that by which theories we choose to train, or our theory of choice. Here's the problem with that, though, is that you need to be using what resonates and is meaningful to the client to be highly effective. And so that is where you may have your preference, but it may not resonate, with your client. And so really kind of understanding what it is that is what they need, and being responsive to that, rather than going with your pet project or your pet way of doing things or what worked for you personally. Okay, so professional self-doubt. This was a top concern for many of the people who wrote into me, and I have decided to define this factor as imposter syndrome mild. So a little imposter syndrome is helpful. The third of the four factors that is attributed with very high outcomes is having some professional self-doubt. Am I helping? Am I doing the right thing? Some people actually wrote those questions into me. Congratulations, you've got this factor nailed. So reflecting on your work, reevaluating, reevaluating your effectiveness, and being open to new ideas, when they're not working. And you never get like perfect at this. And even I know on Friday, I was working with a client and I framed something in a way that didn't work for her. And I was like, oh my God, you're right. And I was able to step back in that moment and correct course. So no matter how long you do this, you will have moments where you need to go back and correct yourself. And so that willingness to be wrong, that willingness to really be curious, because your ability to be vulnerable is the foundation for your ability to connect with your client as another human being. And what for me has always been kind of my litmus test is, do I have a strong alliance? Does my client openly, freely, and readily disagree with me without blinking an eye? Because until I have that, I don't know if we have a two-way street, because most of the clients will sit there, shake their head, but in their head, shake their head and say yes to you, but in their head, they're like, I'm not doing that, or that's wrong, I disagree, she doesn't get it. And until my client says that openly, freely, and regularly, I don't think I have a connection. And then finally, the fourth one, which is probably a little more intuitive than some of what we've talked about, but is this concept of deliberate practice, which you may have heard of. It's definitely become a bigger movement outside of the profession and more increasingly within the profession. But so clinicians who are highly effective, they engage in deliberate practice. This is training that falls outside of the workday. This is training that you're doing above and beyond to get better at what you do. And so it's really focused on improving your performance, improving your skills, And as you may have suspected, that if you've got self-doubt, you're more motivated to do this. And so it really takes this very determined, you're going to help your clients whatever it takes, even if you yourself have to change or learn something new. And if you have this attitude that every client that walks through that door, you're going to find a way for them to get better, you are going to become, you're going to have this deliberate practice and figure out whatever it is, you know, even if it's a medical referral, some kind of brain-based intervention that's outside of your scope, you're going to figure out how to make it happen. And in our field, you're seeing a lot of this virtual mixed reality simulation, which really allows for this fine attunement of practicing skills. I have to give a shout out to folks who've been in my course where I do this virtual reality simulation. And, you know, I have such respect for clinicians who've been practicing for 10, 15, 20 years, who step into this training situation where they're practicing leveling up their skills in a very micro fine way. I think that takes a lot of courage as a licensed person, but it is so invigorating and refreshing, and it really levels you up. A lot of the approaches to deliberate practice in our profession focus on using video supervision and even video self-supervision, you watching your own tapes, critiquing yourself. You don't always need someone else to do that for you. There's a series actually out by the American Psychological Association that has role plays designed to actually practice in a deliberate way rather than the random ones that most of us did in grad school. And literally going out of your way to measure your effectiveness and your outcomes to get that type of data on whether or not you're effective. And so this is an example of what one of our mixed reality simulation clients looks like. But these ways of deliberately practicing your skills intentionally, whether you're in grad school or even after you get licensed, those are the ones I have the most respect for. It's important. It makes a difference. I've always said it takes about 10 years of deliberate practice to really become highly effective. So, and then if you're wondering what doesn't matter, I found this very interesting and liberating too. Your age doesn't matter. Your gender doesn't matter. Your professional degree and license does not matter, as much as we like to fight with who's better, whose training is better. Your self-reported evaluation of your skills doesn't matter. Your experience, okay, there were some mixed results, but there are a frightening number of studies that says experience doesn't matter. Mixed results on that one. Your theoretical orientation, sad to say, not consistently mattering. Your ability to adhere to that treatment protocol doesn't matter unless you're not very good at forming an alliance. Woo, okay. So let's just talk a little bit about extraordinary clinicians and experts. There is this ability to have this presence. I told you Tom Anderson has it, and we've seen multiple streams of our original, research that we came from. Interpersonal neurobiology is looking at it too, but this ability to be fully in the moment with clients. My work around this is been focused through developing this with mindfulness. I'm sure there are other ways to do it. That's the most developed way I know of in the literature. I love this quote from Rogers. He talks about, I find that when I'm closest to my inner intuitive self, when I'm somehow able to touch with that unknown in humans, then whatever I do seems to be healing. And Harleen talks about at one level, we are just one human being fully human in the moment, connecting with another human, and we're having a human experience. And I think through all of our brilliant theory and research, which I absolutely love, if you look at what I've published, I love it all, but we cannot lose sight of the humanity of our work. And it was also very interesting in terms of what makes these experts, these highly effective people. There is this intuitive processing, which we know is both kind of an intuitive thing, but it's also very finely developed rational analytic skills. But what they found with highly effective experts is that they just have better mental representations of what's going on. So they use their strong basic skills to gather the information, but they're able to consciously draw on theory and to create better models of what they're seeing faster. And if you're new to this work, you're using all of your conscious focusing and information processing on just managing the session. But as you get better, you're able to draw on much more complex mental representations of what's going on. Expert clinicians are just better at tracking the process than inexperienced, and they see the problems and the solutions faster, and they're better at ignoring less important things. And that is part of doing this work well and efficiently. Okay, so let's talk about some practical steps. What does all of this research mean for us and for you? So I think you can boil all of this down to 3 highly core competencies for highly effective clinicians. One, we're going to talk about there's a high level of personal competence that I don't think as a profession we've even begun to really develop in ourselves, either in graduate school or training process or postgraduate. There's a high level of professional competence and skills that do need to be developed. And again, I think we've done some of that well. We're really good at the theory model part, but a lot of the other components, which is the majority of what so much of the research is saying is critical to being highly effective, I think we have a lot of room for improvement in that area. And then finally, and I think potentially most importantly, is this cultivating this humble curiosity towards our work, towards our clients, and that is part of what keeps it fresh. It keeps us from burning out. So I'm going to get really practical here. This is the self of the clinician. We need to be working on our own abilities to self-regulate, form healthy, secure attachments within our own personal lives, and really being able to seek personal wellness because it affects our level of competence. And this takes an investment of both time and to a certain degree, even money. When I look at my own life, I'm being totally transparent here. So, and I actually think being self of the clinician work is boring and it requires discipline, and it's not always that much fun. I don't think self-care is that much fun necessarily. It's discipline. When you want to sit there and scroll or watch, binge watch, there are other things you could be doing that are going to really help develop. So that is your meditation, your exercise, eating healthy, getting yourself to bed when they're on time, when there are more fun things to do, having nurturing friendships, managing your money. Not super exciting, but an important part of having a balanced life, because otherwise you create a ton of stress in our lives. And you do need to be devoting time each day to developing yourself, leading a balanced, healthy life in some way. It doesn't always have to take large chunks of time, but things like exercise take time. They really do. I don't know how else to say it. And it's so important for us to take care of ourselves at that level. And when you think about it, when I look at all of those things I do there, that takes money too. In terms of just signing up, I like to do yoga. Yoga classes are expensive. Fitness, healthcare, getting the healthcare that I think you need to perform at this level in terms emotionally of how we perform at an emotional level. It's a strange level to perform at. Keeping ourselves well, there is an investment of money in doing this too, getting your own therapy or personal coaching, whatever you need to get yourself into that good mental state to do this work well. And so this is the cost of being well. It is an investment. It doesn't always have to be huge amounts of time and money, but it does take some of those resources. Then there's just the clinical, the skill development that we've talked about today. And this is, are you consciously working to improve your skills outside of session over and above the minimum required to do your job? And are you seeking answers to your clients' issues if they aren't getting better? And this takes time and money. I buy a lot of books, researching, going to trainings, consulting. In my first 10 years of my career, I so much money went into connecting up with the trainings I needed to really be, and it takes so much time. Oh my God, I love these Zoom webinars because they save a lot of time. And when it comes to the training, but they all cost money. Well, most of them do. That's why I'm doing this one. And I'm, you showing up today shows that you're already doing this. And this one maybe didn't take as much time, but it took time. It didn't take money. It's still a resource. And so this is part of this whole process of being a professional. And then this third common factor of being curious. This takes a lot of courage to be humbly curious, because you're constantly reflecting on what you don't know. There is this level of questioning yourself without collapsing. That's why I'm calling it imposter syndrome mild. I don't want moderate or severe, but this curious, being open, learning, being open to correction is so important. And it's humbling. It is, and there's a vulnerability in there, but there's a way to be vulnerable and yet strong, and that is what this is. But this, I don't know where to put time or money. This is a characteristic that you cultivate, I think, through doing both the self-care and the professional development practices. Hopefully, the longer you're in grad school, the more humble you get in terms of knowing what you don't know, and oftentimes in working with people getting their doctorates, it's, they're like, oh, there's a huge level of imposter syndrome. And I'm like, good. The sign that you got a good education is you realize how much you don't know. That's a sign you got a good education, and that you never let go of that level of being open to learning more. And that is really the key. And over the course of my career, when I started, there was not an evidence-based treatment that was published and talked about widely. They were in the research foundation. They were in research development, and there was hardly any research that was out there to guide clinical practice. And so now, the whole field has totally transformed. And there were moments in there, I swear to God, there were moments that have defined the course of my career. Because I remember when I first started learning about manualized treatments, and those of you who know me know I am trained as a postmodern collaborative clinician. And that just made me bristle to hear about these EBTs. And I'm like, what I do works, and I know, And in some ways, because I was a textbook author and a professor, I said, I have to go educate myself. I have to go learn. I was almost forced to do it. I don't know if I would have done it if I wasn't forced to, but it made me so much better to learn, to really be curious. And there are moments, I promise you, where you're going to be like, what I'm doing is working. I don't need this new stuff. This newfangled stuff is all wrong. It's bad. And I invite you to remember this moment. I warned you, if you haven't hit it yet, it will come. And I invite you to stay curious, humbly curious, that maybe, you know what? We're all working so hard. What our jobs are there is no, it is endless, because basically someone comes to us with any problem of the human condition, and our task is to help them through that and resolve it and work through it in some way. And the truth is, every little bit of wisdom I can collect and knowledge I can collect to help me do that work, I appreciate. And I hope you do too. And this attitude of humble curiosity, not getting rigid, is so, so important, especially the longer you do this work. So how do you become extraordinary? I really do hope, and this is kind of where my professional energy is going, I believe it'll take me a good decade to flesh all of this out, that we're going to move towards much more comprehensive frameworks, that we're going to be less micro-focused on all of our different theories and the whole history of the field, and coming up with much more streamlined frameworks for doing this work that do focus on these critical skills, that really factor in who we are as humans, showing up in the room, finding ways to talk about that, and to train people and to develop those skills within ourselves, figuring out how to do that well. But I really think we are looking at coming up with much broader frameworks that allows us to draw on all these different theories. And so I'm going to just lay out two of these options I see. And the first is the do-it-yourself plan. And for some of you, this is really what's going to work, but really coming up with a three-pronged plan for yourself, where you're developing yourself as a human being, cultivating your emotional, relational, and physical wellness to do this work well. There is this, put your oxygen mask on first before you help everyone else. This, they call it self-care, and I think we talk about it at a very surface level, because I like to argue self-care is boring and requires discipline, and it's not always the first thing you want to do, but it is so important. And this is like 360. This is how you manage time, your money, your relationships, your own emotional well-being. Then there's also professional skill development and really seeking high quality training in skills. And you're here today, so obviously everyone here is already doing this. And make sure that when you are learning, you're focusing on skills, not just knowledge. Acquiring knowledge is important and knowledge is good, but what this research is telling us is that those who are highly effective really work on that skill piece. And in terms of professional curiosity, I think the easiest way to cultivate this is to doggedly pursue successful outcomes for all clients, to figure out what it is. And sometimes it's something outside our scope. I have learned to partner with alternative and functional medicine doctors, with those clients who have chronic issues or severe issues that I wasn't able to easily, readily help. Sometimes it's looking at some of the brain-based interventions, especially for severe and complex trauma. Sometimes there's a level of what happens in whether it's neurofeedback or EMDR or EFT tapping, that there's something going on there that helps the chronic trauma. And whatever it is, even I'm not, you may not be trained in, you have to go get trained in it, but you need to know when and how to refer, but never give up on or settle on your clients. Doggedly pursue success. And this is, where I am for focusing my energies is what I call a synthesis approach. It's what I call it therapy that works. I don't know what else to call it because it's not a theory. It's not really integration. Integration is putting pieces together. This is a boiling down, and I would just want to outline, what are the 6 components that I'm working on developing and training folks in that I think is where this field is moving, is having these single comprehensive evidence frameworks. So the first is developing, and I have been working on this for the last couple of years, the self of the clinician in personal effectiveness, that who we are as humans in our personal lives, or not our personal lives per se, but how we navigate those, the skills we have to navigate our own lives. They are part of the foundation for creating that bond. And we need to be very genuine and true and honest with ourselves. And you don't have to be perfect. That's what's beautiful. You just have to be pursuing your own personal growth and development in order to forge those types of connections that we've been talking about today. The second is learning how to facilitate this type of highly effective ability to connect well with all clients. And I don't think our profession has done a good enough job here. And so that is so much of what the research is pointing to, is this connection is essential. That third piece, which we heard about what experts do, is that ability to, as a client is talking, to have this single comprehensive framework. And and after 30 years in writing, I spend my whole career writing on theories and textbooks. It's all in my head because that's what my job has been. But when you're seeing 30 clients a week, and God bless the folks who said they were seeing 30 people a day, you don't have time to read all those books. And in those sessions, you need something very simple, streamlined, simple vocabulary, simple framework that's easy to use with all your clients. Because the person who's doing this work hour after hour after hour cannot have the 20 different theories required for virtually every license, at least in the United States, that you need to memorize. That's just gobbledygook clogging up your head. And I do run a license exam prep course. I have a lot of feelings about that. We have way too many theories. We need to streamline and synthesize, boil it down into something simple that you can use so that you can still connect as a human. Because if your theory is too complex, you cannot connect with the human who is sitting in front of you. And that's one of the places I think we're a little off course. We have to simplify how we do this work. Evidence-informed treatment planning. And this is another huge issue. And I think medicine has done a much better job than we have. We have lots of evidence to guide our work, to know what works for certain clients and where we can be flexible. The research actually tells us this. We do not have great mechanisms. So this is an important part of this therapy that works, method I'm developing, is how do we synthesize that research base? So as a client's talking, you're like, okay, I know exactly what the research says. and I can use that. It's not going to dictate, it's not going to give you all the answers, but it does help guide what's likely to work, what's not likely to work, what do I need to think about, or, what don't I need to think about? And we need to get much better at distilling that evidence base for us. And then also similarly with the treatments and interventions, especially for our difficult to treat clients, there is guidance there. And we need to make that much more accessible to the average clinician. And the last one here is solidifying gains. I call it ending well. It's funny, we've taken this model from physical health. It's like, oh, your symptoms are gone. Okay, bye-bye, and you're on your way. But mental health, we know, doesn't work like that. The relapse rates are really high. And so solidifying gains, there's a whole set of interventions and ways of work to really solidify a person's more preferred narrative, solution narrative, whatever you want to call it, this new identity where they feel strong. And this is particularly important with marginalized clients. And so we do not do enough to really, solidify those gains. Most people are just trained to compliment their clients and do a little cheerleading fest. And there's these interventions that take it much deeper so that you help the client construct a new identity, construct a whole web of relationships around them that really nurture the kind of the gains that they have experienced working with you. So, and all of this requires not just talking about it, not just a talking head, but deliberate practice. And that's also what the research is showing. And in my course, I use that mixed virtual reality, which is just, it's just magic. I call it, it's like an amusement park for clinicians because we get to just safely play. But learning these skills and not just reading about them is truly what's going to put you into that highly effective clinician category. Okay, so thank you so much for joining. You will get your CEs. The recording is going to be uploaded. The handouts, the references will be uploaded. You all got access to a course. If you can't find it, look in your spam mail from the day that you registered for the course. Some folks, I heard it went to spam. You just log into your portal. You'll get an announcement when everything is up and ready to go because we got to edit all of the videos from today and get everything up there. And I am going to invite you as well right now. We're opening up the registration for my master course, Therapy That Works. You got a coupon here, Extraordinary 2022. And so please, if you're interested in learning more about, this is a full master course on how to do this work well, you're invited to check that out. And at this point, what I'm going to do is open it up for questions. And my assistant here, Alina, I know you've been gathering questions, and I would love if you want to send some my way. And you can drop your questions in the Q&A. There's a chat. You can put comments to each other there, but please try to put your questions in the Q&A.
All right. Hi, Diane, and hi, everybody. So I've been looking through the chat and just kind of noticing if some people have questions. I noticed one question was one attendee asking how to learn how to stop doubting themselves as a therapist. So if you want to spend some time answering that.
Well, as we have learned from this new research, a little self-doubt is a good thing. And I think getting feedback from your supervisors, from your clients is real important. And then also getting training is real important. And I mean, that's one of the things that so many people love in this course, The Therapy That Works, is virtual reality training. We get to work with clients, you get feedback from me on how you're doing, you're watching other people and you're like, oh yeah, I would have done that. Or, no, I went, oh, I see that. And so getting that real-time feedback on your skills is really important. And we don't do enough of that. And it's so exciting that we do live in a time in history where we have access to some new training technology that's phenomenal. But getting the feedback, get real feedback. Don't be afraid to hear that you did something wrong or you could have done it better. That's okay. And you know what? I'll tell you this too. No matter what you do or say in session, someone could give you suggestions on how to improve it, and that's okay. The question is, another way to think about it, all you need to do is say one useful thing in the entire 50-minute session to be helpful. And in my early qualitative research, that's what I really found. Clients were like, yeah, I remember one or two things that the therapist said in the session. And that's what was helpful, because I did qualitative research around effectiveness. You do not have to have every utterance to be brilliant. If you say, put your foot in your mouth, if you have that secure connection, you can correct it. And so it's really focusing and tuning in on your client and seeing if things are working and getting that feedback. Great question.
Okay, great. And then some other attendees are wondering more, if you can share a little more about the Therapy That Works program, how its cost structure, and if the training is appropriate for students, or if there is a student rate.
Yes, absolutely. The website is Therapy That Works Institute.therapy or /Therapy That Works. It's right here. And maybe we can pop that into the chat, Alina, if you get a moment. Yeah, so this is a 5-month comprehensive training program where you go through 7 modules that develop you as a human. And that first module I'll share with you, I really do a deep dive into who you are, how to set goals. And I actually draw, I don't know why our field does not draw from motivational psychology research, because for a program, for a field that's all about setting goals and achieving them, we don't use the research on how to do that, which is just mind-blowing to me. And so I give it all to you. We teach you how to, create these mini habits, do them, habit stacking and make things happen. And I have people say that what they gained in their personal life from learning how to develop themselves as a self of the clinician, it is worth the whole price of the course, the whole purpose of the course, because we just don't do this. And I might someday do a whole, 6-month course on self of the clinician. It could be a year-long program, but we need it. And it's just so liberating and freeing, and addresses all those burnout issues. We don't do that well in this field. I don't know why. So this is my attempt. It's probably, I think for many of us, it's our favorite module. The second module, I really go into connecting well, like I talked about. And like I said, I do it in a non-theoretical language. You can cite Buber, you can cite Carl Rogers, Harlene Anderson, Tom Anderson. They're not married, by the way. Dan Siegel's inner nerve. I use it. You can use whatever you want, but we do this non-theoretical way to really connect as a human. And so developing that part of the curriculum. And then I go into this way of case conceptualizing, where it distills all the different theoretical models. You can use your vocabulary. I give you very simple, non-theoretical vocabulary. You can layer it with however you like, however you were trained. Some people are psychodynamic, they can use it. I got postmodern people using CBT, humanistic, systems, you name it, you can layer it right on top. And you're like, oh yeah, this is what I've always learned. That thing, why do all these theories sort of sound the same? There's a lot of overlap, and I'm going to show you how that works. So that's a lot of fun. And so that's the third part. You get a full tour of the evidence-informed treatment base, which for a lot of people, just like, especially if you've been out in private practice and not sure if you've got enough EBTs under your belt, this is very reassuring to know what that evidence base is. Learning, there are certain interventions that the evidence base, they're important to at least understand, even if you're not going to do them, how to refer out and get, in the United States, we call it functional medicine. It's actually international practice, but how to really get at the 20 different physical variables that exacerbate mental health. Again, totally we underdeveloped part of what we do. So that has been liberating and is actually helped a lot of people with their difficult clients, even their family members with chronic health conditions, their clinicians with chronic health conditions. We do that deep dive. We go into the brain-based stuff, which is just also, especially for chronic trauma, chronic mental health issues, totally eye-opening. We go into, and then the final piece, which I love, is just solidifying well, which we talked about. And, spoiler alert, we take the same way we conceptualize the problem, we turn it around, use the exact same system for assessing and deepening and solidifying the solution, preferred identity, whatever you want to call it. You can call it, I'll let you call it, use your own language. So it's this perfectly balanced system where you get to see both sides and they're perfect mirror images. So it's super simple and easy to use. And I think that's what people really enjoy. And the last part is I put a whole career path, income generating, and allowing you, because another thing we don't get enough of is laying out the different career paths, in this profession, and helping you consciously identify which one you want, where you want to go. Maybe you have a dream of writing a book or doing a YouTube channel. Maybe you want to start a private practice. Maybe you want to run an agency. Maybe you want to be a supervisor. But just looking at all of that and start identifying the ways to get there. So that is the kind of overview we do. And then throughout, we do this virtual reality training. I'm not going to tell you exactly how it works. All I can say is that we all get to work with one client. We get together for 2 hours, or you can watch the replay, but we get to take turns working with this extremely lifelike, real client, and practice these skills, do the deliberate practice. And I get to give live supervision. We get to pause the session, which we can never do with real humans. And it is just magic. I don't know what to call it. It's magical. It is absolutely mind-blowing and magical. And it never stops. And you'll be at the edge of your seat your whole time. Is what that, the deliberate training piece of the course. And so that is, I think, a big overview of the course. The registration opens today, and the first module is actually online, ready to go. And it takes it's 4 to 6 weeks of recorded video per month. So, and you can watch that at any time you want. And then there's always 1 to 2 live sessions that are offered at different times on the weekends, some in the morning, some in the evening, so we can get people around the globe to join. It's really fun to be working with clinicians around the planet with the same client. So you get to, it's just incredible experience, just the cross-cultural discussions we have and the similarities across, various cultures and countries, as well as some of the differences, and but a very beautiful part of the program. So I think that there is a coupon here, and there are different ways to pay for the course. It's a 5-month course, so you can certainly spread it all out or do it all at once. It's all up to you. You can check that out online. Did I get all that, Alina? That was a long discussion there.
Yeah, no, I think you did. But there are a lot of people asking if they'll have access to this recording again, yes. And if yes. So, how? Other people were wondering if they can get access, like, to the slides as well.
Yes, yeah. So everyone, we will be I'm doing 2 versions today, whichever one I like best will be posted probably by tomorrow morning, if not by tomorrow afternoon, in the course. So when you registered for this seminar, if you registered on, through one of my emails or one of my social media posts, and you registered to do this Zoom part of this webinar, I know some people are watching live on YouTube, so I'm saying that. If you actually and you can register if you're watching this on Zoom to YouTube, you'll see, we'll get the link into the live stream there. You have to register to get the CEs, and you will have a recording. You will have this full PowerPoint. I'll tell you the last 4 slides are going to be all the references that I talked about today, because there's a lot of great stuff in this course. And as well, then you take a quiz on it, and then you will have the CE certificate sent to you. But you do have to actually go into the course and register in order to get the CEs. And this will all be available through February 9th. Like I said, I have to take it down because of other speaking commitments. I have to promise I won't, if someone's going to pay me to do this, I can't have it up posted for free, basically online is how that works. Since I do a lot of public speaking, and this is amazing. This is good stuff. That's all I have to say. It's stuff people normally pay for, but I think it's so important to get this out to everyone, whether or not they can afford to pay or not. Having this knowledge available helps everyone on the planet, because as we know, we are in this group listening to this is helping at least 1 million people in the next year, and that's just directly sitting in front of them. And then there are millions more, tens of millions of people benefit from having this available. So do not linger and dilly-dally. Make sure you get through in the next week. Just watch it for an hour. It's about 1 hour and 15 minutes, I'm seeing, so you'll probably get 1 hour and 25 minutes of content, of also your CE credit. And then we'll go from there. I see a question about virtual reality. Oh. If you're not logged in, how do you log in and take the quiz? You go to therapythatworksinstitute.com. You go to an email that gave you a login and a funky look. They assigned you a weird little password. You can change it when you're in there. And then you'll see that you're in a course that has a Making Therapy Simple kind of bonus module. And then you'll see this module in there. And sometime tomorrow, you will see this recording, and the handouts will be up by the end of the night for sure. But hopefully, and then you'll see the ability to do the quiz and the evaluation you need to do for the CE certificate itself. Okay, the virtual reality training, that is a hard thing. Right now, I happen to be at a university that one of the only ones in the whole country that has a contract to do this for counseling. I think there's one or two others. And I know CSUN is probably the most developed in this way. I work at Cal State Northridge. And so I do it in my Therapy That Works course, and it is a paid thing because let me tell you, virtual reality is not cheap, but it is amazing. And I do think the AMFT, American Association for Family Therapy, is developing some programs. I don't know where they are with all of that because they were starting before the pandemic. I don't know where it ended. And I've been very busy since then. But at the moment, but this is the only continuing education I know of at the moment, and there may be others. I'm just not aware of other ones. Okay, let's see what else we got, Alina.
Okay, so another attendee is wondering about what you think about the role of the therapeutic relations in highly structured manualized interventions such as DBT, and if there's any research on this.
Well, you know, that's part of this jaw-dropping, eye-popping research, as I like to refer to it, because it was so clear. The research said that if you are able to form that really strong connection that Rogers, Harlan Anderson, Dan Siegel, you name it, they all talk about it. When you're able to connect like that, adhering strictly to your manual is less important. If you do not have that type of connection with your client, adhering to the model is more important. And it's because you need that structure because it's not happening. So that's what the research was saying in terms of your outcome. So, but I think all manualized treatments, and this is why most of us kind of bristle when we hear them, when they are done well, the relationship is still key. And some of what happens in getting trained to do a manualized treatment, like let's say emotionally focused couples therapy or DBT, in getting all that training, you have confidence, you're able to take in what the client is saying better. You just get higher level training. And so it's hard to distinguish, are EBTs working because the therapist usually gets much better training? They go and get all of this deliberate training. Is it because of that? Or is it the method? And that's hard to distinguish. So even with manualized treatments, the quality of your relationship makes or breaks it. It absolutely does. And you have a lot more flexibility if you have that alliance. So even EBTs don't work and then they don't work if there's a poor relationship. I didn't mention this. I guess I should have. I don't know. It's a little depressing. The research also shows about 15% of therapists are worse than all the rest. And no matter what training you give them or what you do, they don't get better. And as a trainer, I've seen those people in the last 25 years in my classrooms too, and they don't get better. And so, so you can give them all the DBT or EFT training you want, and they're not going to get the better outcomes either. So there are a lot of variables involved with these. Great question.
Okay, perfect. So the next question is it possible for a therapist to have theory neutral or grounded theory practice?
Well, that's interesting. Theory neutral. Well, you know, that is what this, and if you watch the Therapy Made Simple training that is in the course I gave you, I really go into more detail there, but I mean, that's kind of what happened to me. And I didn't even try to do this because I was very theory biased early in my career. But what I discovered, because I challenged myself, I think I'm the only person who has a major textbook on counseling theories and family therapy theories. It's a lot of theories. It's about 40 to 50 theories I have done in depth, and I'm obsessive when I review a theory. And but I promised myself, if I'm going to write about a theory that maybe isn't my favorite, I am going to try to represent it I'm going to learn everything I can. I'm going to represent it with the enthusiasm and positivity of whoever developed it and whoever uses it. And I really came at it from an appreciative inquiry perspective. What can I appreciate? What is the gem here? And when I did that, I began to see this pattern across all the theories that they're kind of, they are all talking about the same thing, aren't they? They're all describing the same thing. And if you know the politically incorrect, we're going to use the blindfolded metaphor of, there are three men touching an elephant and one's feeling the tail. It says it feels like a rope. The other blindfolded feels like it's the leg, feels like it's the trunk of a tree. Another feels the side, feels like a wall. The ears feel like fans, right? They're all touching the same elephant. And we're all looking at humanity's problems together. We're all describing the same thing. We use very different languages and we describe it as so different, but there's so much more overlap when you start pulling off the theoretical language and you try to describe it in normal, neutral terms. You're going to see a lot more of where the common, there still are some differences, there really are, but we over focus on those. And I think it would be so much easier to learn and benefit from it all if we could find more theory neutral. That's a new term for me. I like it. So yeah, I like that question. So I think there are ways to work. I call it a framework. I still think you need a framework, but there are methods like collaborative therapy. Carl Rogers actually has a lot more theory there than most people give him credit for. But there are ways to work that are much more process focused. And I do think you can do this work well without the language. Great question.
Okay, great. And the next question is there research on therapists transitioning into coaching?
It's an interesting one. I know there probably is, I don't know, but there are more and more people doing it, I think during the pandemic as well, because it allows you to work across state lines. And for those of you who aren't familiar with coaching is a practice that's similar in some ways. You're helping clients achieve their goals, but it's more wellness focused and you're not treating mental health disorders and you're not supposed to be using psychological interventions or psychotherapeutic interventions, specifically. And you're not treating mental health disorders. You're working on wellness. You can achieve a relational goal necessarily, or you can help someone pursue happiness without necessarily treating depression. They're different things. And I don't know exactly what the research says. I know legally it's just important to keep those two practices separate and not do a lot of crossover with clients there. But what's interesting is this Therapy That Works course draws actually that I talked in the beginning about the motivational research literature. Coaching does that better than psychotherapy, and that's something that we can learn to do better. And that's why I put it into my course is how do you motivate people? What actually works to get people to change? And a lot of it's breaking it into those small little steps and such, and pairing it with, things they do every day. There's a whole treasure trove. There's a whole education you can get in that. And we need a little more of that in psychotherapy. Coaching is much more results oriented. And for some of us, that would be an improvement and an addition in terms of leveling us up in the work that we do. So great question.
All right. Next question is that if you can clarify the difference between skills and knowledge, for example, learning EMDR, IFS, etc., seems like some of both, but it also seems like having to learn these things is close to getting drowned in multiple theories.
Absolutely. Absolutely. When I teach my license exam prep course, I'm like, you're going to have to learn 20 theories, 16 to 20 theories. California trimmed their MFT exam down a little bit. When you probably have only used 2 or 3. And it's really hard to use more than 2 or 3 well. And so that's the problem, because the other problem is, having studied 40 or 50, I know each one has a nugget of beautiful wisdom in it that we can all use when helping our clients. So that's where I think the future has to be these frameworks. And so my Therapy That Works framework, I don't know what else to call it, method, it's not a theory. It's this framework that synthesizes it. We have to stop synthesizing. Any of you who've been in the field for 10 years, you have just come in and you're just flooded with just too much knowledge and even too many different ways of describing the same skill set. Let's be totally real, right? How many, do we really need, we have 500 different recognized theories by SAMHSA and counting every day there's a new one, right? So what are new people? And then conversely, people who are, 10, 20, 30 years into this, how in the heck do you keep up with all of that too? I think it's easier because you do have more of a knowledge foundation to build off of, but it just doesn't make sense anymore. I don't know what else to say. And it's bizarre because I have a course where I teach the 20 different theories. I've written all the books to teach everyone the 20 different theories. And after doing that for 25 years, I've decided this doesn't make a lot of sense. We need to do something different. This is where you'll be hearing me talk about this. This is where my energy is going to, is creating a framework that synthesizes it and makes it simple. Because the truth is, connecting with another human being to have a human experience that helps them resolve a common human condition experience shouldn't be as hard as we have made it in this field. That's all I'm going to say there. And I think the beginning of the question was, is there a difference between knowledge and theory? And the knowledge is like the theoretical piece. The skill piece is something different. The skill piece is what you're actually doing in the room. And at least in graduate school, we go way overboard on the knowledge piece, and the licensing exams are almost entirely knowledge-based. There is a possibility of using this mixed reality simulation to do skill-based licensing exam. We're probably 20 years away from that in this field, but medicine is there. But that is where I think we will be heading, because it is a skill that needs to be demonstrated. And for me, this simulated learning is the best way. Video supervision or live supervision are the other ways to do it. I just freak out in this world of YouTube that you can, I don't like having any client on video anymore. I actually tried to buy the old VHS tapes for my students to keep data secure, and you can't even buy those, which I think is a huge problem. So security is a big issue with the data stuff, and the simulation that allows the pure focus on training. It is absolute magic. Any educator listening to this, you can email me and I'll give you the link to learn about it, because it changes the game. So I think I answered that, Alina, did I?
Yeah, I think you did. So the next question is more along talking about this approach that you've been talking about. So the question is, how might this approach apply to researchers of qualitative research versus clinicians?
Well, that's interesting, because I am a qualitative, not a quantitative researcher. I have deep respect for quantitative researchers, but I love the qualitative piece because that human connection is there. And the same way I connect with my clients, I use a variation of that to do my qualitative research, which is listening. It has that human connection piece, or it can, not all qualitative data doesn't have to, but I do use a very collaborative research approach that allows for that type of connection. And so I definitely think qualitative research, and that's where you're going to hear the real human story, which is so important to all of this. We need it. The honest to God truth is we need it all. Okay. So we need the synthesis piece. And that's why synthesis is so important. There's so much knowledge. There's so much research. There's so many streams of research. I don't know what else to call them, because you have, the evidence-based treatment stream, you have the common factors stream, you have more generic outcome streams. There's so many, theory, streams of research for each of the individual disorders. It's ending. So we need more ways to synthesize in this profession those streams of knowledge. And now I've even forgotten what the question was, Alina. So I hope I got it. And then you can maybe go on to the next one.
Okay, so the next question is how does one deal with inferiority complex as a physician?
That is fascinating. And I see Molly asked that question. And in my last time I taught this course, I had I had 3 physicians go through this program, and some of them were working, they weren't even psychiatrists. One was a psychiatrist, 2 were pediatricians. And so, yes, I think physicians are dealing with this same inferiority complex, because they have, similarly, just overwhelming amounts of research, knowledge about health. And it is impossible to keep up. It's probably more impossible to keep up in medicine than it is in mental health. And so, but I think what we talked about today is the same thing is true for physicians as it is for clinicians, And especially when you're able to make that human connection. I know physicians work in much smaller bouts of time. It doesn't take a lot of time to make that human connection. That certainly helps you with your burnout. And when your clients, your patients trust you more in medicine, you know what? They're going to tell you a lot more of the truth. Because if you look at the research, most patients don't tell their doctor the whole story. But if you're able to create that connection I'm talking about that we're trying to get in mental health, you can do that in physical health. You're going to see the same benefits. And you're going to get that real feedback from your clients, and that is going to help with the inferiority complex. And part of it is, just remember, a little bit of imposter syndrome makes you better. So doubting yourself a little, just don't slip into that hole. But just know that you're constantly learning. It is impossible to know it all, and that's okay. But if you keep that relationship going, if you engage in deliberate practice, continually working to get just a little bit better, finding ways to help all your clients, even if you go outside your scope of practice, like we refer to those physicians, sometimes they figure it out. You might have to refer to mental health and we'll solve it. But trusting that process, it's the practice of medicine. It's the practice of mental health. We are practicing. We are not gods. None of us anymore will have all of that knowledge in their head ever again. The human knowledge, and especially with the internet, has just exploded. So that is never going to be a possibility. You'll never know it all, but you can master the process of connecting with the human, getting all the information from them because they trust you, especially as a physician. It's true for us in mental health as well. It's even more true for physicians. And learning how to engage. That's why deliberate practice is so important. You're constantly doing these little improvements, getting a little bit better, and trusting that, and knowing that humility, that willingness to question yourself is what's going to make you great. Awesome question. Love it. Next.
Love it. I feel so inspired now.
Good.
So the next question that we have is wondering about the insights from the several studies that you shared, and if you can share those references.
Absolutely. Yes, that you're going to get them in the reference list. The Castengate and Hill I used for a lot of this presentation. It is a book. It's an expensive book, but it is a book you can purchase. It's one of those, I said, whatever, it's $60, $80 book. That's part of that, professional, you find the good books and you buy them, and it's kind of, and I just found another one too. I'm going to have to buy that. By Miller and Duncan and one of their new colleagues on deliberate practice that they just put out last year. So I'll be getting that one as well. It's all in your reference list that you'll be getting by the end of the night. How do we have access to the video and handouts again? I'm sorry, I just saw that one pop up. Again, you're going to go to this Therapy That Works Institute. You're going to log in with the email you used to register for the Zoom webinar and for this workshop. And then you got an email that gave you a password. If you need to, you can email us again at our help, which is friendlyhelp@dianegayhart.com. Friendlyhelp@dianegayhart.com. We'll help you try to find your login if you lost it, but you should have an email that you got that day that has the password in it.
Okay, perfect. There are a couple questions of people asking if the course is a one-time thing or if it's going to be offered again in the future.
Well, this is the one time I know for sure I'm doing it in 2021. You have 2 years of access to it. So you join now, you will, you can, take it at your pace. It's paced out. But some people, life happens and they just, end up, but you have full 2 years to go through this, and then you'll have lifetime access to all the pre-recording videos as well. So this is the one time for 100% sure I knew it. I have a couple other projects, so I'm not sure I will be able to offer it either next fall or next spring would be the next time. But for definitely next spring, but not necessarily in 2022, because it's a 5-month course. It's a long course. So if you want to take it in 2022, this is your for sure time to take it. It's a good question.
Okay, and then a couple other questions are coming up. If the materials that you provide on these courses will be available for lifetime access.
Not for this CE course, is only through February 9th, this particular CE, because I will present this information because it is so exciting and so cutting edge. I am presenting it in other places, and I can't have a free version competing with paid versions. That's not allowed. So, but the course for therapy that works, yes, you'll have access to that for life.
Okay, and then someone else is asking about the coupons. Is it possible to use 2 coupons? I'm assuming they have one from being on a.
There's only one coupon, and that my entire system only allows you get one coupon is what you get. Yeah, there's only one coupon, and the system doesn't even allow you to use 2. My platform that I use, so you'll be able to use 1.
Okay, all right. So moving on to this next question, very fascinating. What do you think is the 5th force in psychotherapy, following psychodynamic, behavioral, cognitive, postmodern, positive psychology, and then what? Do you think it's neuroscience, or
Yeah, what is it
just
going to
wondering
be?
your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, obviously. I certainly think neuroscience is going to change a lot. I have a whole other workshop I'm going to be doing on some of these newer brain-based things that are just amazing. Like I can now meditate and know what brain state I'm in. I can now sleep and know how long I was in deep versus REM versus light sleep. That's pretty amazing information for us and our clients to have. So I do think neuroscience is going to be a definite piece of it all. And I also think we are going to move towards these comprehensive frameworks. I call it synthesis. I'm still working on a better word. If you've got a better word for me, let me know. Because integration is still too clunky, because we can't integrate 500 different theories. Like the human brain, especially the 21st century brain here, we can't really handle many more than 5 things at a time in our brain. So we have to streamline. We need to come up with these comprehensive frameworks. Medicine has done this. Medicine's way beyond using theories. It's very science-based, obviously, but they're methods, and we're going to have to streamline more. But I do think neuroscience and some of these new technologies, even EFT tapping is considered an energy-based thing, but it uses the meridians, and it's got SAMHSA research, and I believe that the VA is using it. When it first came out 20 years ago, I thought, I don't know about this. I don't know if there's any research, but it's using that to shut down the stress response or calm the stress response. Very powerful. And so I do think this mind-body piece. The other thing that's huge, along with neuroscience, is just the mind-body connection. There are 20 different biological mechanisms that we know of, including the gut health. We know exercise, vitamin D, all the different vitamins, food allergies, gluten intolerant, all of this stuff affects us. And so, that's really one of the secrets in my class, is learning how to refer out to get a high level, very detailed assessment for the biological things that are either causing or exacerbating, because unfortunately these are bidirectional. The more depressed you are, the more these biological negative things happen that creates this negative spiral, and it goes both ways. So also looking at the physiological components and correlates to the mental health stuff and I see it in my clients. I'm able to get such better outcomes because of that. So that's another area that we're, obviously it's outside of our scope of practice, but we need to have the knowledge to know how to refer and who to refer to, and how all those pieces fit together. So yeah, I think neuroscience could be the big 5th one, but I also think there has to be a way to synthesize all of this into much simpler frameworks for us to do our work well. What else we got?
Okay, perfect. So the next question is there a specific type of mechanism for client feedback after or at the end of each therapy session that you utilize to assist clinical skill building through the client's perception of clinician
Yes.
skills?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there are several. If you have my Mastering Competencies or Case Documentation Psychotherapy books, I have a chapter reviews some of the basic ones, but the free ones, at least they've been free as far as I know, are the original session rating scale and outcome rating scale developed by Miller, Duncan, and Hubble. I believe they first came out in 1997. Scott Miller and Barry Duncan, you can go to each of their sites and download the forms for free. You need to sign a copyright agreement with them, but they do give it, the paper versions are downloadable for free. And those are a great, they're simple and straightforward, and everyone can have an issue about anything. But a lot of it is getting the dialogue going, having that conversation. I also just use a mini qualitative interview at the end of my first session. How was this? What worked? What didn't? Do you think I'm going to be helpful? So I do a little mini, I'm a qualitative researcher, so that's my default. But having that conversation at the end of the first session is very powerful. Great question.
Okay, so next one is a trainee wondering if you have any recommendations for helping new trainees learn some of basic interpersonal skills of therapy. Some talk about micro skills in counseling, and we don't seem to have a good text for that in MFT, and it's difficult stuff to teach.
Totally. And that is why I created the Therapy That Works course, because we don't do enough of it. And I know I saw some question somewhere that said, who's this course for? I have brand new people who've never seen clients. I have people who have 20 years of clinical experience. Everyone is learning this same new framework. If you're new, you get to hang everything you're learning on it, and it makes all of your graduate and postgraduate training so much easier because you see how it all works and you have those micro skills. And those people have been doing it for 10, 20, years. They get this framework that allows them to synthesize everything they've always known in a way that is just so much easier to use. And it just really makes the work lighter and easier, and you're just even more effective. And that's what's kind of amazing. Every decade of doing this, you get more and more effective. So, and that's where the micro skills training comes down to that deliberate practice. Virtual reality simulation is certainly the best way to do it. I don't, if it's not happening in where you're training, then it's very hard to do by yourself. And that's one of the reasons I've created this course, because it's a difficult thing to do. And I'm just so happy this simulated reality just creates this amazing platform for practicing skills that are very hard to practice anywhere else, but without hurting someone. So.
Oh, perfect. And speaking of the virtual reality training, that's another question that's next up is, what is the name of that course that you teach for the virtual reality training?
It's called Therapy That Works. It's just what it's called. I don't know what else to call it. I call it the Gayheart method or Therapy That Works method. And that is the course that I am registering. It's a 5-month course, long course, but we get you through. It's paced out slowly. It used to be a 3-month experience, and that was a bit much for folks. So I stretched it out to give a lot more breathing room.
Okay, next question is, what is one piece of advice that you would share with students who are preparing for the licensing exam and clinical practice? How can we synthesize all the information taught with new information and changes that are happening within the field and the global community?
Wow. It is a very, I guess the main advice is to not let yourself get freaked out. And it is a lot. And to just know that it's kind of what the physician was asking too. You're going to just engage it one step at a time. There's only so much your brain can process in any one moment. Keep doing that deliberate practice. Keep looking at yourself. Focus on that relationship for the best outcomes. When you're studying for your exams, make it as efficient as you can. But that synthesis thing is kind of looking for those patterns that connect. And it is not, I think, an easy thing to do early in your career by any means. It's taken me 25 years to put this into words. I didn't even realize I was doing it until like 5-10 years ago. So it takes a long time to synthesize all of this material, I would say. Great question, though.
Yeah, very great question. There was a question that was in the chat a while back that we missed, but is asked by Bianca, and it's asking, what are your thoughts on couples therapy and holistic implementation such as energy healing?
Well, there is also some new research out around some of the energy psychotherapy here, energetic psychotherapy that is coming out. That is saying that there is something measurable going on and that there is therapy going on. And so there is, that really gets into, it's funny, it connects up with some of the the interpersonal neurobiology folks who are just talking about consciousness. So some of what the energy psychology is getting at is looking at what is this human consciousness and how do we understand that? And neurobiology is also very curious because we cannot find the physiological correlate for consciousness. We know it has a lot to do with the brain, but there's not a correlate there. And so that's a huge question. What is the mind? What is this consciousness? And that's where the energy psychotherapies are looking at that. And there's some interesting stuff going on in that field too. So we just all have to buckle up, be flexible, keep learning, keep training. There isn't a lot of sitting still. If you want to be highly effective, it's a constant growth, both personally and professionally. Great question.
All right. So we have four more questions in the Q&A. The next question is, someone is interested in asking about learning basic interpersonal skills of therapy.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, hopefully you got that in your graduate program. And I think when you look at what the research is telling us, most of our graduate programs are not doing a great job. And it's not something you can learn from a book. Hopefully it's something you're learning in supervision. And sadly, most people don't get much or any live supervision, which is why this simulated reality is, it's in a class by itself. It is in a class, even over and above live supervision, which I've done for years, even over and above video supervision. This simulated training it's in a class by itself, and it is the best way. The other best way is to get a really good supervisor who's modeling it for you and can explain it. And that's why it's part of this Therapy That Works course. And for many people, that module, I do a lot of that in module 2 is where I do the basics, because actually the whole conceptualization is actually based on how you connect, which is mind-blowing to me that that's actually how it all lines up. I'm telling you, synthesis is pretty eye-popping. But even if, the basic skill I talk about is get the movie, the behavioral description and interpretation, learning how to do that well. For a lot of folks, you're like, my clients were telling me they felt more connected to me and I was doing a better job, or they felt like the sessions were more helpful. So it is so important, and we are not doing enough of it well out there in the field. And that's why I've created this course, really, because it's a teachable skill. And it's just our profession can do a better job at that. How about that?
All right. So next question is referring back to when you were talking about the difference between therapy versus coaching. One participant is wondering if you need a license to be an MFT coach.
You do not. Coaching is not a licensed, regulated profession in most states yet. So for coaching, you normally you can get a certification, but technically most states, the states don't actually require that either. If you can figure out how to do coaching without that, set up a practice. But there are certification programs, but it is not licensed at all. I see that there's a question about credits for NASW. And this course is accredited by the NBCC, National Board of Certified Counselors. As far as I know, most states will count an NBCC credits for social workers. That's pretty standard. It is theoretically possible your state doesn't. You'd have to, look that up. But NBCC and NASW and APA are generally, and AMFT are generally approved by all states. So the national regulating for all the 4 major bodies. I'd be very surprised if any state doesn't. I've never heard of that.
Okay. And this question is, will you need to be currently seeing or treating clients in order to be an appropriate candidate for this program?
Oh, absolutely not. In fact, we had one person who was in the process of applying for graduate school who absolutely thrived in the program. And so you do not need, and many folks are just about to start seeing clients. So, and it certainly helps before you go out to the field. It's in terms of bolstering your confidence and getting you ready to see clients. And the paradox is that people who've been licensed for years love it just as much because they get something just different out of it. And in terms of having this framework, it pulls everything together, updates all of their skills, and just really just makes it easier to do this job well. And it's a profession where we're constantly upgrading. And this course, you get you get this framework that will carry you through your whole career and all the different stages and how it makes sense to you is going to be different at each stage of your career. So I think it's been a wonderful experience.
Okay, and then there's one last question that I see in the chat, and it's if you have any recommendations for textbooks that to structure teaching of interpersonal skills.
I have not taught that course in a long time. There are some by, I know, solution-focused clinician books like Buber does some of this. There was actually a textbook I used a long time ago. It was called, I think, Mindful Listening. And actually there is, my colleague, Eric McCullum, wrote a book called Mindfulness for Therapists. And I think there's something in that. And there's actually that helps get at this kind of therapeutic presence piece and the mindfulness, because it does regulate your stress response, which really does help in the early years of doing work. But it helps with you developing that secure attachment and that ability to connect. You know, one of the other, excuse me, theories or things that I've noticed is that that ability to observe the mind. And I talk about this in my course, excuse me, I need some water here, is that ability to observe your mind in action, and it keeps you from being fused or biased. I guess I've been talking 2 hours and my throat's feeling it. I apologize. And that ability to be the observer of your own mind. Wow, I'm losing my voice here, guys. It's hilarious. And that's why I think mindfulness and some of that, and I do it very light. Listen to my voice. Oh my God. You know what? It's 10% humidity here in Southern California. And my allergies and just the dry air has been awful. So anyway, so I would say some kind of mindfulness piece is really good as well. You can come at it from a collaborative, postmodern type of perspective. I think I see it in Carl Rogers. I don't think most people teach it that way. And you can even do some of the Dan Siegel's neurobiology, attunement, neural resonance. There are different ways to get at it. Depends what works for you and your students in your program. Yeah, the body is saying it is time to end. Absolutely. I'm like, yep, that is too funny. Awesome. Any last questions? Was there anything on YouTube? I don't know, Lena.
YouTube was just giving me a hard time trying to post the link to the free CD.
Okay.
So,
I'm sorry.
So some people who are watching on YouTube, they're, were trying to get, hold of that, but for some reason YouTube kept taking down the comment with the link I kept trying to post. So I don't know if you wanted to maybe kind of see if you can re-upload this webinar onto YouTube with including the description, maybe.
Yeah, I think we'll be able to do that when this is in. That's fascinating. Yeah, they're probably keeping you spam off the chat. I'm so sorry, guys. Yeah. I can't create the YouTube beforehand to make that happen. It has to be a fresh one when I send it over. Okay, people, I hope you're feeling a little uplifted, hopeful, a little more at peace with a little bit of imposter syndrome mild. I created a whole new syndrome for us today. And yeah, especially you all, I mean, this group of people who is listening, you are doing such amazing work. It's such a hard time in history, a difficult time in history. I think the mental health professionals will be dealing with the pandemic long after everyone else has gone over. I mean, there's so many people who have experienced tragic losses, lifetime health issues. We will be helping them through it. So hopefully this morning was inspirational and fun. And as my voice has let us know, it's probably time to end. And I hope you were as inspired and enjoyed this research as much as I did. So everyone, wish you well, be well, take care of yourself. I hope I inspired you to take care of yourself. make sure you put time and even some of your financial resources back into taking care of yourself, so that you can continue to just get better and better at doing this work here. So love y'all. Take care. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. Keep doing good out there. And those of you on YouTube, if you're still there listening, I will give you the link. As soon as we hang up, I can post it. I'm 99% sure. Y'all take care. Bye-bye.